Support for this show comes from Lead Quizzes. Lead Quizzes helps you easily set up high-converting quizzes to capture and qualify leads for your business. Visit leadquizzes.com/podcast to get a 14-day free trial today.
So 2014 was an okay year because we built sales and we made strides. But, if you lifted the rug a little bit, you would have saw a lot of dirt under there. And, you're asking about HR and things like that. It wasn't quite 2014. We would have been there 7 days a week, 75 to 100 hours. And so what our job then and my role then is to plug every hole, to stick my finger in every single leak and stand there until we closed.
From Lead Quizzes, it's Journey to Seven Figures, a show about entrepreneurs and the stories behind how they grew their business to seven figures and beyond. We cover the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the lessons they learned along the way. Welcome back to Journey to Seven Figures. Today I'm interviewing Jonathan Buford. Jonathan's the co-founder of Arizona Wilderness Brewery, a brewery based out of Gilbert, Arizona, rated the #1 new brewery in the world in 2013. And last year they generated $5.5 million in revenue. I'm really interested because it's going to be a little bit different than the episodes we normally do. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be the different one.
Awesome. All right. So Jonathan, you weren't always in beer. You had a window cleaning business before. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about what you're doing before the brewery and how you kind of transitioned into the brewery business?
Yeah, I can go back even to high school. I had a t-shirt company in high school. I don't think I ever thought I was being entrepreneurial. I just was expressing my creative freedoms, right? And I started Next Level T-shirt company, which coincidentally enough, there is a company now called Next Level T-shirt Company, not mine. But I did that where I'd sell it to some friends. It was just, again, expressing creativity. I moved to Phoenix in 2002. I had a Chevy Nova, not the cool ones, the ones that were hatchback with rust all over it. And I had $300 in my bank, a wad of cash I saved from delivering pizzas when I was 18, 19. And I got to Phoenix and I immediately bought a guitar. So I had no money and I had a rough start here. But every step of the way, I've tried to be someone who lets creativity and passion run that's who what I think my image would stand for. I worked for a window cleaning business because I was getting married and I realized I have no money. Women don't like that. Wives don't like that. So I saw this ad in the paper and I said, that seems like a unique job. I'll just do that for the summer. And right away, I saw some deficiencies. And again, at the time, I was not a whiz. It was just kind of plain to see could be doing some things better. And I signed a no comp clause and I read that and I said, man, I don't care. This thing's not going to stand up. So at 23, I started to buy my own equipment and I let a few months go by after I left that job. And I started Valley Shine window cleaning. And it was from the garage, truly from the garage. And I really enjoyed learning how to take risks on that. You're showing up and knocking on someone's door. The two things that was unique about that was I was kind of a servant to my own company. I was the laborer and I ended up having a couple, crews here and there, depending on the time of the year. But you have to sometimes just roll up your sleeves and do some work. I don't think everyone forever should have to do that, but it's good to see what it's like to be in the labor force. And so I ran that for 7 years. Again, I wasn't Warren Buffett over here running a window cleaning business by any means. I just was a guy who figured out how to make a few bucks on his own idea. And for Christmas, if you want me to get into the craft, how I got into craft beer, because a lot of people like this story. For Christmas, like 2010, I will admit that I was getting really burnt out on, it was working, unfortunately. The window cleaning thing was working and I didn't have any skills to know how to hire people. So I had a couple employees that might not have been the highest quality. So I was doing a lot of the labor and I was getting very worn out. It can be mundane, obviously, to just do the same thing all the time and then go home and do the accounting for it. So my father-in-law had heard that I was getting into craft beer and he bought me this book called John Palmer, How to Brew, which I always call the Bible. And I never read a book so fast. I'm not a reader, not interested in reading. I like more audio. And I just read this book and it was mixed. Creative people can be scientists and then you essentially have this product that you have to market in the end. I was like, that's wow. It encompasses everything I wanted. So I read that book and then I found podcasts, maybe such as one like yours, where I would be cleaning windows and listening to podcasts on how these breweries were being successful. And then Discovery Channel picked up a show that was called Brewmasters. And so I watched that. And then a couple of documentaries came out. And it was a perfect storm for someone hungry like me who really wanted to just move on from their career. I wasn't going to be a window cleaner forever. And I didn't have any intentions to go any further with that. It was a reaction to not having money. So this one, the beer business, kind of like, it was, again, the perfect storm just happened at once. And I looked my wife in the eye and I said, I'm going to start a brewery within 3 years from today. And I was sitting on a couch watching that, one of those shows I was talking about, just watching how great these brewmasters were. And I said, I'm going to do this. And yeah, sure. Just keep making money, whatever you do, And I think she was worried about that look in my eye that I had, the one that a lot of entrepreneurs have, where they don't know why or how they're going to get there, but they're just going to do it. And so that was the impetus of that. And I don't regret it. I'll tell you that.
Okay, awesome. So that's a cool story so far. So you told your wife that you're going to start this in 3 years. So what happens next?
So what happens next is I needed money. That's an obvious one. And again, I wasn't a guy with a ton of money in the bank account. I was a part-time landscape photographer, more of a hobby than a money-making venture. And I was more or less funding that. And I just didn't have a ton of money. So I knew that there was some small brewery kits that I could purchase that would allow me to, one of the secrets, I hadn't brewed yet. So I said that, and she said, cool, you should probably learn how to brew beer. And I said, okay, yeah, I probably should learn how to brew beer. And so I took her 401k, and it wasn't a ton of money. We're not talking big time stuff here, but I bought enough to go into the garage and start to make a couple batches of beer. And then I heard a brewery in, North Carolina or something like that had done Kickstarter. What's that? Let's check it out. And I looked at their campaign. And what's cool about our generation is everything is so freaking new on technology wise. I can remember the day I found Instagram. Kickstarter was brand new and crowdfunding was unheard of. And one brewery had done it. And I guarantee now thousands of breweries have tried it, or hundreds at least. I mean, I could probably have scrolled that day through Kickstarter and found every account they had at the time. It was pretty new. I thought, I could sell myself. I could do this. And I thought it was the most brilliant campaign. I look at it now and I laugh so much. Like, sometimes you just have to be naive and immature for people to like you. If I went there all polished, I don't think it would have worked as well. But I still laugh at it because it was just kind of me. Like, I wasn't lying or making it up, but I was just basically saying, like, I don't know, but if you give me money, I'll figure it out,
Yeah. So you guys bought this brewery kit, and then did you do the Kickstarter campaign right at the same time, or did you make a couple of brews before?
I made a couple of brews before.
Okay.
Because that would have been embarrassing, obviously. Back then it was only Facebook. I wanted a little bit of people to be talking about us. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, I went to the guy's garage. Holy crap, he's brewing great beer. And so I had that interaction with some people. And so it was time to do the Kickstarter. I put this incredible campaign together. I mean, this video it's probably going to go on to win some awards. It's so good. And I obviously have issues. It's pretty cheesy, but it did engage people. And I chose 35 days. I remember that being a big deal. You could choose as many days you want, but I just felt like a little over a month, and it would, kick people into action. In hindsight, I could give you a version of what it did for me. But at the time, with no hindsight included, at the time, it was like a job. It was. I remember going into it like 40-hour-a-week job where I got to get up and I got to manage this thing. I got to go, like a politician almost. I got to go tell the people what I'm about. And so we might have illegally had some tasting events at bars behind the scenes, but you do what you do, And so we served our beer to people, and they said, I like this. I could see this doing well. And we did it a multifaceted way. I mean, I was out till 2 a.m. every night, because about 11 o'clock, some people start to get a little more friendly. And so you say, just go to Kickstarter and I'll get you more beer. And so I did what I had to do. And it turned out that we were able to raise, I think it was $43,000 after taxes and everything. I'm probably 36, but that was, now in hindsight, I'll give you that version. What that really was an incredible PR and marketing campaign. It got people to know who I was and what I was about. It was way less about the financial. Now that I'm over in our warehouse behind me, we just dropped in probably $400,000 worth of tanks. And you just learn what capital expenditures, it was not so much about the money. It did help me a lot in the beginning, though. I was able to buy some equipment and put money down for a lease, things like that. Architects and contractors, they wanted to see that you had a little bit of money. So it really did help with that. But truly, it was just an incredible PR campaign.
So looking back, like you guys raised $43,000 in 35 days. You mentioned that one thing you did was you did tastings. And then so like after people would try it, you would drive them to the Kickstarter to support you guys. If I got that correct. And was there anything else that you guys did to really market this and raise that much money in such a short amount of time?
Yeah, the supply demand chart is nothing like, I mean, I always get a kick out of this. And I know a lot of industries can compare this, but I mean, 1983 was Sierra Nevada's. We're talking like the 80s in the craft beer industry is ancient history. Like you'd think we're talking about the Egyptians, but it's the 80s. So when I started that, what we're talking about this, how I drove people to it, I was just given the horse water, and there wasn't a lot of water back then. Today, I would never recommend a brewery or anyone in the industry as packed as mine right now. There is now 90 breweries in Arizona. There was 10 at the time, maybe. And so the supply demand chart was pretty lopsided. There was no supply. There was tons of demand building. So I'll admit it was a lot of right place, right time. And so, yeah, I mean, we'd have events and basically put a good beer in front of them. At that time, beers that are now considered so readily available in a gas station were just showing up on tap in the Valley. And so there was like, wow, we could have our own cool IPA or our own cool beer from a local company. Yeah, I'll give that guy some money. And so it was the right place, right time thing. It really was. I don't think I could do anything like it this year. I mean, I would have to hire a PR strategist and help me identify who I am in the marketplace compared to all these other incredible craft breweries that have opened. And back then it was a Wild West and there's a lot of land to be grabbed.
Okay. So you guys raised this money, get enough money to buy some equipment, sign a lease. So what happens next? You quit your window cleaning business and then you guys sign a lease or you begin construction?
Yeah. A word to the wise, you should keep your day job when you're building a company, unless you know what you're doing, and you'll know what you're doing when you have money in your bank account. I should have kept the window cleaning business, but I think I was so excited to jump into this new world. And I thought everyone's going to say this. Oh, I thought I knew what I was doing, but I really did think I just thought tomorrow I'll figure it out. Tomorrow I'll figure it out. The next day I'll figure it out. And that's one regret I do have, because at the time I really needed some money, and it was just right at the tail end of the Great Recession. And I mean, if it wasn't that time, we would have foreclosed, but we were 6 months into not paying a mortgage. Funny enough, that was normal back then for a lot of my neighbors on the street that I lived on to not pay for 6 months. And we did get out of that hole eventually, but my wife wasn't really thrilled with this. And she was more than just questioning. She was starting to look at her future and say, what are you doing to us? And so we built this place kind of with no money in the account. The lease that we signed, here's a great story. The lease that we signed probably should have been looked at by more than me and my business partner at the time. And the guy who wrote it came from a law firm called Galbit and Galbit. And this is just pure coincidence. Today, he's our COO. His name is Charles. He's a Harvard graduate. So one of the reasons he works for us is because we were signing these leases that he was writing, and he was killing us. And so you trying to see how far we've come. Now we have a COO who went to Harvard, and he was the lawyer that was writing these leases. But we signed a lease that we should have never really signed. However, I think every business owner would say that. Like at the time, that was a really risky, bad move to look at leases and things like that. And buildings, I didn't do a ton of assessment. I just knew that the road that I was on had 56,000 cars a day drive by it. So I was just looking at basic math. But yeah, we went through some hard times opening that. That year was, it feels like as a business owner, you're supposed to do everything. That's what the initial reaction to me. It's like a puppy. Like you should just always be everywhere doing everything, but you're going to be taken care of at the end of the day. And it wasn't going that way. And we had a year where I had to look a contractor in the face, because past Kickstarter, by the way, we did do investments. We did just notes. We did not actually do equity. I had a strong feeling to never give up equity. And I would still say that's a strong feeling. That was more of a gut reaction back then. And now it's more of a business minded sense, but we did investments where a lot of them were $5,000 of someone's 401k. We found out about this convertible loan back then. And so we said, hey, we could make more money with your 401k money than your 401k company is. And so we raised a lot of that. We did have a large angel investor to give us the major chunk, but I did have to look the contractor in the eye and say, we were out of money. And that was one of the bottom 5 days of my life, because the contractor was thinking like, look, these guys must have a bunch of money, right? They must be well prepared. So they're building, they're going. And I didn't know what a change order was back then. We would come in and go, I don't like that. Let's do this. And it's just, things got really expensive. And I'd look at me and I'd tell them that we don't have that. So that year, I wish I had a job. I really wish I kept the company. I didn't sell it for all that much. And I probably should have kept it. That was naive of me to like be so excited. But again, I wouldn't change it for the world. And it is what it is. Those scars are now healed and we're all right. But it was a tough year. It was.
So you guys delayed like your opening for quite a long time, or longer than you guys thought. So what was that? Was it the change orders, or you guys' inexperience like doing this before?
Yeah, it was inexperience. So we're building downtown Phoenix right now, and we have such an incredible team on my executive team. Charles is the sensei. He crushes contracts. Like there's no one like him. So now like we would have a schedule. We know exactly to the day what they should be doing, and we'd hold them to it. Back then it was like, well, I'll just show up in the morning. I'll hang out there, and if they need me to grab a hammer, I'll be there. And I just didn't have the sense of understanding what CEO-ship was, to manage a company from the top. And I was kind of more involved in the company. Probably it's a cool way to tell a business story, and I'm fine in the end. But back then I risked so much by not knowing what construction timelines were and true costs of things were. And I just wanted it to kind of like everyone to be happy. You know, I wanted the contractor to be happy, my partner to be happy. My 50% business partner at the time was our first employee. His name is Patrick. Patrick's the head of brewing operations here now, and kind of just everything. Titles don't really matter when you're at the top, in my opinion. I think you just kind of plug holes and then you enjoy successes. But Pat and I, we met, and it was actually during the Kickstarter phase. And I said, hey, I think I have an opportunity for you to be the head brewer. I just realized I'm not going to be the best brewer. I've only brewed 20 times on a little home brewing system. And so I saw Pat's drive and force work, you know, his labor force was like, it's still to this day, like nothing you've ever seen. And he was very logical, and he had a charm. He's very charming. And I thought, well, we could be cool together going out in the world and kind of selling this brand. And so he was our first employee, and was part of that. And unfortunately, I had to also tell him, I don't have any more money to pay you. He left his brew job to come over thinking we're going to open in April. Ends up at first February of 2013, and April, and then June, and then things happened. And we ended up September 2nd. So from February till September 2nd, I couldn't pay Patrick, and he had to give a lot of sacrifices to basically come stand in a building that was being built nail by nail. And so obviously I wouldn't recommend that to anyone. I would say, you know, what I have in Charles, operations minded person who also has a law degree, would be what you should be partnering up with. You should really have some clear thinkers in the room who bring you back down to earth. And if you're not ready for that, I wouldn't recommend getting into entrepreneurship. Sure, it worked out for me, but you would believe, I mean, I gained 40 pounds that year. The stress, the hair loss, the grays. I mean, I'm 36 today, but I shouldn't have been going through that. It was a weird time in my life. And sometimes the black and white version of what this business has been is crazy to me. Where we're at today, I just got back from Chicago from an incredible event, and we're constantly traveling and moving and shaking. But then I look back then, I'm like, wow, I can't believe we made it past the pre-existing version of this company. It's crazy to me.
Okay. So you guys you go through this whole period, you finally get it open September 2013, and things move pretty quickly for you. So within a year, in 2014, you guys hit 2.9 million in revenue. The year before that, just under $1 million. So I want to talk a little bit about your quality, because you guys were rated the #1 new brewery in the world, top 100 brewer in the world in 2014 and beyond. So I want to talk about how did you guys really come out and develop this incredible quality product, especially because you'd only done a limited amount of brews?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think the answer should be good, just because it's kind of a driving force in how we got here. Day one, I know, again, I told you before, I was just leading the horse to water, but there wasn't a lot of water, and now there's water, right? We're open. And in the craft beer industry, I oddly like to talk about the shoe industry and clothing industry a lot, but I do analogies between the two. There's just materials and shoes that weren't being used yet. And now Adidas just moved to number 2, and what I call a very pivotal move for Adidas. And I can see the same thing in the craft beer industry. There just wasn't beers being made yet. Techniques, types of hops weren't being used yet. And so we were using them. We were literally using new raw materials that hadn't been out. And so we were kind of getting this whoa, I want to go try that. We were diversifying this market that was pretty, I don't want to say bland or stale, but it was the same thing since the 80s. It was a red ale, a blonde ale, a stout. And that's fine. We love those breweries too. We just were offering something new and exciting. I also blended in my love, and probably because I grew up in the Midwest in Ohio, my love of agriculture. So I had a story to tell. It intermixed the two of them. Like, hey, not only is this thing brewed with oranges incredibly unique and tasty, but the oranges came from this farm and here's the farmer. So I feel like, our company was giving this new exciting guideline and baseline of what craft beer can be. And then now the city of 4.5 million people has access to it. They had the baseline breweries that were making great beer, but they weren't diversified. And then I also just started noticing, why does everyone think Phoenix is boring? Why does everyone think this town has no agriculture? Why is it that I'm backpacking? Why it's called wilderness, by the way. I was backpacking and walked into a wilderness area. Why is this so bland to other people in the world? And so I thought, I better tell the story. So I gave people both the story, and that's not ego. I didn't give people something, but that was my focus. The agricultural side of Arizona and its diversity, and then also this brand new craft beer world. Some of it's esoteric, but some was really cool to the guy down the road, the girl down the road, to come in and say, an IPA brewed with different types of hops or oranges, and so I just had that. And then there's also the true esoteric crowd called Rate Beer. They were coming in at high amounts and they were saying, this is new and cool. And I'll admit it, they're probably giving us higher ratings because we were new and cool. Were we the best new brewery in the world? Well, it doesn't matter because they gave us the award. It's like, what the guy who won the Oscars or the girl who won the Oscars, were they really the best actor that year? But it doesn't matter. They got the Oscar. And so I think we just, again, right place, right time. Anybody who would say we're all smart. No, we had a lot of luck. That moment, I woke up to an email from a guy named McKellar, and he's a Danish brewer who's kind of I would call him world renowned easily. And now he's a mega success. I think he's one of the better CEOs in any industry I've seen. But he texted me, congratulations. I never would imagine McKellar writing me. Now we're best friends, of course, but I just would never have imagined all this happening. And what does he mean by best new brewery in the world? Turns out Europe got the news first from Rate Beer. And he's like, and I'd like to invite you to a Copenhagen beer celebration. I'm like, I've never been need to get my passport, and man, it was a cool morning. That was January 30th, 2014. And we entered a new stratosphere. It is what it is. I had 16 employees that day. And what I'd like to pass on to anyone is, if you have a hype person, you should also match them with a logic person. And so my logic person at the time was Patrick, but he had to brew. So we were co-brewing together, kind of co-running the company. And I did have another partner, and we can get into, where that went. But long story short, we had to supplement some of the downfalls. I didn't know that we would be such a successful restaurant. So we had to figure out how to run a restaurant. But Pat had to brew the beer. So he wasn't there. And he also wasn't my partner yet. He was our employee at the time. We had people lining up because unfortunately might have been a better hype man at the time than I should have been. And I had people coming in saying the best new brewery in the universe, the best brewery in the universe. And no, we're not the best brewery in the world. It was a publication called us the best new brewery in the world. So I went with it and I pushed hard. We had every news agency and we had award-winning anchors coming in to talk to the best brewery in the world. And I'm like, no, we're not the best. Whatever, just go with it. I don't care. It was one of those things where you just build your company and you go. And so the line formed. And I can tell you, when we had several issues, we didn't have the right staff. We didn't have the right infrastructure. Our food ordering, processing, and all the things just weren't there yet for that amount of people. So yeah, big success, but then you got to deal with it. And so the next part of 2014 was me dealing with it.
Okay.
Learning how to react.
Okay. We'll get back to the show in a minute, but first a quick thanks to our sponsor, Lead Quizzes. If you want to grow your business to 7 figures and beyond, you must learn how to generate leads predictably. When I first started my business, lead generation felt like riding a roller coaster. I would have huge sales months and then months with nothing. This happened because I relied solely on referrals and networking to grow my business. Predicting growth and investing in the future were frightening because I didn't have control over my lead generation. That was before we created Lead Quizzes. Now I predictably generate leads in my sleep and have stopped worrying about where the next sale will come from. Top marketers like Neil Patel and Lewis Howes have used Lead Quizzes to increase their lead capture by up to 500%. Think about it. Quizzes are fun, engaging, and you can offer personalized feedback in exchange for your quiz taker's contact information. Lead Quizzes is a software that allows you to set up high-converting quizzes quickly without having to hire an expensive programmer. In fact, our users have generated over 3 million leads for their businesses. Take control of your lead generation today and start your 14-day free trial by going to leadquizzes.com/podcast. Before we jump into the operations side, as far as like your marketing and like awards, like how did that work? You guys got this first one.
Yeah.
It just happened. And then you just started going to the news outlets and trying to push that story harder.
Well, and again, lucky me, I just gave everyone the best interview I could. I kind of just went at it full bore. And I think KUPD here in Phoenix was the first person to call. And I just kind of gave them my passion and like, we're just guys, working hard. And then the next agency is like, I got private messages from ABC 15 on our Wilderness Facebook page back then saying, hey, do you mind? And then it just went down to like, this guy, there's a face of the company. Let's get him on and talk about it. And so I did 8, 9, 10 interviews that week alone. I did a couple in California because Rate Beer was based in California. And so I just gave this interview that I think was inspiring and it caused more people to go with it. And then social media was finding its new ground. When we started, social media was very grassroots and it felt kind of janky, if you will. And I liked it. I did. I liked to be able to get on and say like, hey, we added a tank today. Look at us. We're the guys who were able to afford a tank. And we kind of had this grassroots feel. By that time, I think Facebook had, the dilemma of being, a multi-billion-dollar company. And I had to take it a different approach. And so we more made ad campaigns that said best new brewery in the world. And it was us holding a sign. I had to show a different image. It couldn't just be like the happy-go-lucky guys. It was now an image that we were portraying. And it worked very well. People responded. When they came in, they might not have had the best experience. And that's what you want to talk operations later. That's where we became in my opinion, a real business. But we now know that we have the marketing. We now know that we have the strategy. It's to stay on top. It's to continue to be exciting. And so the marketing's working. And I also am in a town that was the fastest growing town in America for 10 years straight. So, from 25 to 40,000 now to, I think, 165,000 in Gilbert. I now have a market that if I only get 3% of them, I'm successful. And so we worked on a lot, like our signage on the street. We have 56,000 cars because it's 87, which is Arizona Avenue, but it's a state highway. So we have a 6-lane road right out in front of us. And we just had to put good signs up. And one of them says burgers and beer. And it just, we got the marketing down by just being exciting and being obvious. And I'm very lucky to never. And I'll tell you, in the window cleaning business, I learned a valuable lesson. I took a phone book ad out from a company called Dex. And I put a pretty good chunk of money, all I had. And not 3 months later, I found out that Dex was going to put all of its marketing into billboard campaign and online. And so this is back in 2006. Google was hot, but the SEO stuff wasn't quite what it is today. And so I made a mistake and I put a ton of money into a phone book. And I got like 20 calls that year. And so I learned that if you're going to put all the money into quality, one thing that's going to have to become cheaper is either labor or marketing. And we chose marketing to be our least thing that we put money into. We really believe that we have the best team in the world, brewery wise. And I think I've made a very good investment in my team. And marketing has been something that we're very lucky to not have to spend a ton of money on it.
Interesting. All right. So I think so far to kind of cover some things, like you guys really focused on quality. You guys started telling like a story differently around your beer, which I think probably helped you guys create word of mouth where people, they have something more interesting to say about the beers after they try it.
Yep.
You guys got these awards and then you leaned on those to leverage really getting people in and creating more buzz and story around it. So as we get into, you guys started September 2013, 2014, you guys go on to do 2.9 million. So you guys had, I think, around 17 employees and you had to double it to 39. So let's talk about kind of your HR and hiring and like what worked for you and what didn't work for you.
Real fast, let's finish the marketing. I have a statement that's on our office wall, and I always, our social media and our logistics side, I always tell them, anyone in our company, always set yourself up that other people do the marketing for you. So be exciting, be bold, tread heavily, don't tread lightly, be loud about what you're doing and tell the story. And you'll have Esquire writing about you, which we're very lucky to be an Esquire. You'll have ABC 15 texting you saying, hey, can we get you on? And as long as you're doing ethically and you're including the community, everybody in the community, not, discriminating against anything, I think that you can save a lot of money in marketing if you're just making pencils down the road. Doesn't matter. As long as you're making them with a story that's exciting, you'll have people telling the story for you at high rates. And that's why I love the millennials. I don't like when companies bash the millennials and call them hipsters. I hate that because they're telling the story. They're turning around and going, hey, I'm at this cool brewery. My dad's not doing that. His generation's not doing that. Mm-hmm. They're keeping their phone in their pocket. So to wrap up the marketing side, it's a firm belief is be exciting enough for to have other people tell the story for you.
Perfect.
In the operation transition, it wasn't quite 2014. So 2014, I always debate, is that the year that was worse than trying to open? Or, I would go back and forth. And sometimes I think 2014 might have been the worst, even worse than going bankrupt, opening this place. It was so cool because I was fitting my role. Everyone who has partners or even companies owned by one person, you're always going to struggle knowing what your true role is. And I knew that I wanted to still hands-on brew and be part of this really attack force team that we had. And we go hard at everything we do. And so we had employees that probably didn't enjoy that and probably were very tired of that. So 2014 was an okay year because we built sales and we made strides. But, if you lifted the rug a little bit, you would have saw a lot of dirt under there. And, you're asking about HR and things like that. It wasn't quite 2014. We would have been there 7 days a week, 75 to 100 hours. And so what our job then and my role then is to plug every hole, to stick my finger in every single leak and stand there until we closed. And it was cool because we still didn't fail. Sometimes you look back like, wow, I broke every rule. I broke every business rule. And so we had some dedicated team members that I adore, I love. But what we learned was anyone who went through that time, they're going to have a hard time in the corporate transition. We're not corporate, but I think we've instilled some values that I hold highly, and you could call them corporate. And so 2014 was that. And then 15 and 16, we parted ways with our partner. He's a wonderful man. We got to the point where we really needed people to be involved. And they needed to find a role that was exactly what the company needed. And so I'm very fortunate because not always do founders get to stay with their company. And we can think of a lot of examples. And number one, obviously, would be Apple. And I found myself watching and reading a lot about Steve Jobs at the time. And how did he get to the point where, I can't remember his name off the top of, but the guy.
Wozniak.
Well, yeah. Well, no, the guy from Pepsi who came in and essentially.
The CEO.
Impact, by the way, is Wozniak. But yeah, who basically said to the board, like, if you got rid of Steve, it would be, I didn't want to get in that position, I guess is my point. And so I had to really self-evaluate what was going on. And I found out I was more or less trying to please my partner and everybody around than I was trying to please my business. And I'm not saying that I was even pleasing those people. It was confusing, and we were building sales and we're getting better. We're hiring a little better at a time. We had very passionate employees. 16, we probably had 50 employees in that range, but we still weren't sitting down in interviews that I'd call like what we do today, this defined process. But we went to the buyout, and I implore anyone who's getting into business to understand that when you're signing a contract with somebody, there's no law that can get you out of the contract until a judge gets you out of the contract. And trust me, you don't want to go to a judge or an arbitrator. What happens is that contract that you have with that person is just a negotiation point. So when you're going through a buyout, the contract is just a starting point for negotiation. And, like when Sun Tzu's Art of War, sometimes the only way to win a battle is if you both win. And that's a complicated topic, but just know that when you're going into business, you have to have a partner. You have to have this person. Is this person going to be the most skilled at what they're supposed to do? Or is this somebody that you just like to be around? And what's going to happen is you're going to like to be around them, and you're going to want to please them, and you're going to want to make things all kosher while your business is not. And so we went through a buyout process, and I met this man named Charles. He's working at a law firm in Phoenix, and he's been recommended by one of our brokers who's helping us expand. And I meet Charles, and immediately this calm in the room came over, and, you have this view of lawyers, and I didn't get that feeling. And Charles would only speak what I would call positive reinforcement, but constructive criticism. And he just really knew what to say at the time. So he got me over the hump of what a buyout is and helped me through that. And then I also decided, let's add Patrick as 50%, so Pat and I now own it. It's 2017. Charles came in and really, he just started in August of this year. So this is pretty new, but while he was our lawyer, would just give us such great advice on, one thing at a time, chill out. I know you're trying to do 70 things at a time, but right now, if you have an HR need, let's just talk HR need and let everything else fall apart around you. Don't worry about the stuff. The wheels going off the train are okay as long as you got the HR thing, and then we'll go to the next one. And then over time, I think he just saw this beautiful relationship forming, and unfortunately he lost his father. And I think he went through what I would call a realistic, who am I crisis? What do I want to do? And it's awesome that he decided that we were a company he'd come work for. So now he's in a COO position, and boy, are we different. I love it. And so, that's where we're at now, but how we built to get there, even because Charles had to pay attention to us. We couldn't have come in so broken. All the employees that we have would never have left their companies for us. And like our head of restaurant operations, Justice, he never would have come over. Our executive chef, Dave, would never come over. So 2016, we finally cleaned up some things, meaning we weren't going 100,000 miles an hour at every single problem. We weren't just attacking like dogs, And we started to slow things down and look at the process and say, what's the number one asset that we have? And we realized it's our employees. And we really did focus on one employee at a time. You can't be everything. Justice was number one, our head of restaurant operations. And then we focused on the chef side. And then we focused on the brewmaster side. His name is Chase. And Chase is, he's overworking behind me right now in our warehouse. We took one employee at a time, and we interviewed with them to hire their assistants, we really learned the interviewing process. I think that's where we really have changed. Everything's changed, but how I interview and how we interview is you are going to be in a defined role with us. We don't like to just throw you, call the spaghetti against the wall and we hope you stick. I don't like that. I think that we should go get skilled, almost assassins for this one exact role. And that's what we've done. And so our interviewing process is I would call it serious, but fun. And we want to make sure that you get the role. I'll be honest. At first, I care if you get the role. And then I care about what you've done before, how to get here. So, that was 16, 17 building that. And now Charles is coming in and I think running one of the most brilliant teams. It's flowing like a good river in the desert, it's moving. And I just am very proud of that part. Is now I could literally go away for 6 months and come back and the company's still there running. And I'm only just trying to add more value to our brand with a better story and keep reminding people that every action that we make, it matters. And so that's my role now. And it's very, very, very rewarding to see a team not need ownership. I think the best analogy was told by hired a consultant in 2016 to come in and just assess things. And he said, Jonathan, here's an analogy. There's a point on a mountain and you're running at it and everyone wants to follow the leader to the point. And so they're giving all they have to get to the point. And then Jonathan, you look to your right and see another point and say, I'm going to go there for a little bit. But the problem is everyone's still running to the first point. And they get there and they go, what the hell are we here for? I thought a life changer for me. I need to stop being the guy that's riling the troops every day and let it be what it is. And so we've allowed Wilderness to kind of take its own turn without Jonathan and Patrick. And I think it's a cooler place today because of that. I think the customers have a lot more say. I think the employees have a ton more say and a lot more, this is my house too. And it doesn't always work out. We know that with employment, but for the time being, I'm very proud of that fact and how far we've come with that.
Very cool. Well, I think that's a really good place as we wrap up here, Jonathan. I want to just ask a couple quick questions before we finish though. Real quick, what's the one thing you did that had the biggest impact on your growth?
Patrick becoming my business partner. Patrick is the yang to my yin. So not getting too like gushy, feelings into it, but there is a metaphysical thing to a business that people don't talk about. And I know some businesses have flirted with this, but there is a soul to a business. And not to get too spiritual, there does need to be an ownership team and an executive team that all really love each other. It has to be more than just, I like that person. And I know that what I'm referencing doesn't always apply. But for me, I really firmly believe that our ethos starts with Patrick and I's true adoration for each other. Like his mother means a lot to me. My mother means a lot to him. It's a family thing. And so we really have each other's back at the top. And that has gone down to these guys aren't money grabbing, power hungry. They're really trying to take care of each other and the business. And so I think making Patrick my business partner was just a fair thing to do. Charles once famously said, you know what I like about you guys is Jonathan didn't have to do that. I think I did. I think it was always in the code book to do that. I think that that's one of the defining things for this company.
Okay. And if you could go back in time and start over, what would you tell yourself?
I wouldn't go back in time and talk to myself. I'll tell you that. It's all worked out, man. I wouldn't fuck with that guy because it worked. And I would tell my wife something. And I wouldn't tell myself. I'd tell my wife, sorry for putting you number 2 for a while. I feel really bad. I'd buy her a lot of flowers and chocolate that day and probably a spa day. I put her number 2 too many times to this business. And I'll tell you, any entrepreneur or young person who wants to be, you don't have to do that. And the reason you think you do, I think there's a machismo thing for the males. I can't speak for the females in the entrepreneur game. There's a machismo thing that like success is this plaque that you're going to put on a wall one day. And that will just never be there. You'll never feel successful. I was once told that the only way to be successful is to truly sell your business. And I actually am starting to believe that. I think my business is successful, but putting people number 2, it will do something to your psyche and your soul that affects what I was talking about earlier with that from the top, there needs to be a spiritual balance, this balance that's more than just showing up to work. And I wouldn't go talk to myself because I got us here and all the scars are healing. And I just couldn't go talk to that guy because it would be a weird conversation.
Awesome. All right, Jonathan, where can people learn more about you?
So I would consider the best place to follow us is our wilderness social media. We like to diversify there. So at AZ Wilderness on Instagram and Twitter, and then on Facebook, it's pretty easy to find Arizona Wilderness Brewing Company. And then our website, which is kind of like a dinosaur these days, right? What are websites? Our website is azwbeer.com. I actually have my own personal Instagram called The Wilderness Humans. And I'd recommend following that if you're ready for, look, man, we're not rock stars. I know that, but I'm having fun. And that's just that. I get to do what I want with the profits and I'm having fun. And I think that sometimes traveling and getting inspiration is a very intelligent thing to do for a business owner. And coming back and saying to a chef, like, hey, you are fucking awesome. I just saw chefs in Tokyo that couldn't do what you're doing. Or I come back with an idea like, hey, try this unique umami burger that I learned about. I would say that social media account, there's some things going on there that are different than Wilderness. So if you want to see what a CEO does, in his nightlife, follow that one.
Awesome. We'll get those linked up. Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey to 7 figures.
Yeah, I never thought I'd be on shows like this. Really appreciate the recognition on that. And, next year we're going to open our second location. And here's a funny story for me is we're going to beef providers now. There was a vegan rally in Chicago, and I understand there's people who don't, but I firmly believe in the local farmer cares about their cows. I've seen them all, trust me. And we're going to sell 100,000 pounds of beef next year at a burger restaurant that I thought we would never. I wrote a menu 2 a.m. before we opened going, no one's going to care about the food. And now we're like this world-class burger joint. And I'm sitting in front of the big wigs of Cisco. There's no longer and sitting in this interview, it's cool to be respected. And I have to just give, and this is not me being cliche, I have a team right through these walls that's just crushing it. And it's putting me in a position to look really good. And I just never thought I'd be in interviews where I'm talking about being successful. I'd always thought I'd be behind. I always thought that the mountain would always have a false peak. And now it's like I'm not at the top by any means, but now it's comfortably successful. I feel like the business is able to sustain itself. So I'm honored to be on the show. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah. Let's grab a beer sometime.
Thanks again for listening to our show this week. If you want to find out more or hear previous episodes, you can go to blog.leadquizzes.com. If you'd like to start generating more leads for your business and get a 14-day free trial to Lead Quizzes, go to leadquizzes.com/podcast. Please also subscribe to our show on Apple or however you get your podcasts. You can also write us at support@leadquizzes.com. I'm Jeremy Ellens, and you've been listening to Journey to 7 Figures.